I thought it was the joint card. My fiancée laughed after draining $11,000, just hours before she bought herself a luxury handbag. Her mom texted, "Relax. She just clicked the wrong account." I said calmly, "Watch your inbox." That night, I pulled every dollar back and shut down all financial access. Next morning, she got 2 emails. One from me, one from my lawyer. I used to believe there were only two things in life you could measure cleanly: fabric and trust. Fabric was easy. You stretched it across the cutting table, smoothed out the wrinkles with the side of your palm, lined the grain, marked your chalk, and cut exactly where the pattern told you to cut. If you made a mistake, the evidence was immediate. The sleeve twisted, the shoulder pulled, the hem broke the line. Trust was nothing like that. Trust could look perfect under bright lights and still come apart the first time someone tugged on it. My name is Ruben, and I am a tailor. I make custom suits for men who like to say words like timeless, European cut, and quiet luxury, while pretending they have never once looked at a price tag. I also alter wedding gowns, cocktail dresses, and the occasional family heirloom someone carries into my shop in a garment bag as if they're bringing me a fragile body. By the time this happened, I had spent 12 years building my business stitch by stitch. I wasn't rich in the flashy way people post online, but I was stable. I had a neat apartment above my studio, solid savings, a respectable emergency fund, and the kind of routine that made me feel secure. I opened the shop at 9. I worked until 7. I ate dinner late. I slept well. Then I got engaged, and slowly, almost elegantly, my life began to fray. Her name was Camille. If you had met her the year we started dating, you would have understood why I ignored the little signs. She had warmth when she wanted to. She laughed with her whole face. She could walk into my shop in the middle of a stressful fitting day, put a coffee in my hand, kiss my cheek, and make me feel like I'd somehow already won. She said she admired how steady I was. She called me old soul handsome, which I pretended to dislike, and secretly loved. She also came from the kind of family that treated money like a theatrical prop. It was never simply money. It was support, it was love, it was showing up. It was how family takes care of each other. And if you said no, even once, it became control, stinginess, or my favorite, keeping score. Her mother, Denise, was the high priestess of that religion. The first time Denise came into my shop, she ran her fingers across a bolt of Italian wool and asked, "Do people actually pay this much for a suit?" "They do," I said. She looked around, impressed in the way some people get impressed only when they realize someone is more useful than they assumed. "Well," she said, smiling at Camille, "looks like you picked a provider." It was a joke. Everyone laughed. I did too. I should have listened to how it sounded in my own ears. At first, it was small things. Camille forgot her wallet at dinner a couple of times. Her mother needed help with a car repair and asked if I could float a few hundred because the bank transfer was delayed. Camille used my card to order groceries for us. Then started adding things for her mother's house because Denise had had a brutal week. Once, when I noticed a charge for a skincare set that definitely had not entered my apartment, Camille said, "Oh, that was for Mom. I thought you wouldn't mind." And because I loved her, and because I had spent my life taking pride in being dependable, and because saying yes was easier than sitting through the offended silence that followed no, I let these things slide. "Your problem," my friend Owen told me one night while I was hand-stitching a lapel after hours, "is that you think generosity automatically teaches gratitude." He leaned against the cutting table, watching me work. "It doesn't," he said. "Sometimes it just teaches appetite." Owen had known me since tailoring school. He was one of those men who could be rude and right in the same sentence, often enough that you stopped getting mad. "You don't know Camille," I said. "I know pressure when I see it, and every time you mention her mother, your left eye twitches." That is not true. It just twitched. I laughed and threw a pincushion at him. But that night, after he left, I caught my reflection in the darkened front window of the shop and realized he wasn't wrong. I looked tired, more than tired, managed, like a man who had begun arranging his own discomfort into neat little folds. Still, I proposed. Of course I did. I had convinced myself that the tension came from wedding stress, family noise, temporary overlap. Once we were married, I thought we would draw boundaries, build our own rules, close the doors that needed closing. There is a special humiliation in admitting how badly you wanted a future that was already warning you against itself. 3 months before the wedding, Camille moved more of her things into my apartment and started talking about blending finances. I was not opposed to the idea in principle. Marriage, at least the healthy kind, requires transparency, planning, shared goals. But the discussions never sounded like planning. They sounded like acquisition. "We should simplify," she said one evening, standing in my kitchen in silk pajama shorts, scrolling through something on her phone. "One household, one flow." "One flow?" She grinned. That sounded smarter in my head. I was rinsing out 2 espresso cups. We can make a budget. Budgets feel so cold. Budgets are how adults keep their lights on. She came over, wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, and rested her chin between my shoulder blades. "You are the least fun man alive. And yet, you're marrying me. That's because under all this grumpy Taylor energy, you're actually a soft place to land." There were moments like that. Soft, intimate, disarming. Moments that made me feel ridiculous for worrying. We opened a joint card for wedding expenses. Florist deposits, tasting menus, invitation suites, hotel blocks, little things that multiplied into large things. We agreed very clearly that my business account, my personal savings, and the reserve fund I kept for the shop were separate. The joint card was for shared wedding costs only. We both had access. I paid it off each month. I explained everything twice, maybe 3 times. Camille nodded as if she understood completely. Then came the day everything ended. It was a Thursday in early October, warm for the season. One of those golden afternoons when the light makes even city dust look cinematic. I had spent the morning fitting a navy 3-piece for a district judge, and the early afternoon hemming 6 bridesmaid dresses that all somehow needed to be ready by Saturday because another bridal shop had totally screwed them. Around 4, my accountant texted me. "Did you authorize a transfer out of reserve?" I stared at the message with a pin between my teeth. Reserve. I set the pin down and called him immediately. "What transfer?" There was a pause on the line. 11,000 from the business reserve to the linked card account, cleared about 20 minutes ago. All the sound in the room flattened. "What linked account?" "The card you opened this summer." "The joint wedding card?" "Yes." My hand tightened around the phone. "Pull up the authorization details." He read me the last 4 digits, then the access route. Online login. Saved credentials. For a second, I genuinely thought there had to be some kind of fraud. Some bizarre error. Some technical mess I would spend an annoying hour unwinding. Then I remembered that 2 nights earlier, Camille had used my laptop to order candle samples because her phone battery had died. I had stepped out to take a client call. When I came back, she was still at the kitchen table, smiling at something on the screen. I had not thought twice about it. "Freeze the business reserve," I said. "Now, I can flag it, but if the money already moved, flag everything. Text me every record you have. Ruben." "I know. Just do it." I hung up and stood still in the center of the workroom, surrounded by half-finished garments and dress forms. Then my phone buzzed again. Not my accountant. "Camille." A photo message. A cream-colored box on a boutique counter. Gold lettering. A handbag nestled inside like royalty. Beneath it, she wrote, "I finally got her. You only get one pre-wedding season." My heartbeat did something strange. One hard slam followed by cold. I called her at once. She picked up on the second ring. Cheerful. "Hey, babe. Where are you?" "Out." "Where?" A tiny pause. "Why?" "Where are you, Camille?" "God." "At Marceau on 5th. Relax." "Luxury boutique." "Of course." I left the shop without even locking the back workroom properly. I just told my assistant I had an emergency and was gone. The whole drive there, I tried, idiotically, reflexively, to construct innocent explanations. Maybe she used her own card. Maybe the transfer was unrelated. Maybe the bag was a gift from her mother. Maybe, when I walked into Marceau, she was standing at the mirrored counter with a sales associate. The bag was on her arm, deep wine leather, gold hardware. The kind of bag that cost more than the industrial sewing machine I bought in my second year of business. She looked up, saw me, and smiled. Actually smiled. Perfect timing, she said. Tell me this isn't gorgeous. I stopped a few feet away. What account did you use? The sales associate's smile flickered. Camille's didn't. What? What account did you use? Her eyes narrowed. Not worried yet, just annoyed at my tone. For what? The transfer. $11,000. And then, God, I will never forget this. She laughed. Not nervously, not guiltily. Lightly. I thought it was the joint card, she said, as if this were all mildly adorable. I looked at the bag on her arm. You drained $11,000 from my reserve fund. Drained? She gave the associate a quick, embarrassed smile. Like men, am I right? Reuben, don't be dramatic. Did you move money out of my business reserve? I clicked the wrong account. She shrugged. It happens. Just hours before you bought yourself a luxury handbag, her expression sharpened. Excuse me? We've spent 10 grand on flowers nobody will remember, but I can't buy one thing for myself? With my business funds? With our money for our wedding setup? She snapped. Do you hear yourself? There it was. The shift. The familiar one. Confusion redirected into my supposed cruelty. Our money? Yes, our money. We are getting married, Reuben. Why do you still act like everything has to be locked away in your little vaults? The associate had silently vanished. Smart woman. I kept my voice level because when you spend your life fitting angry grooms, brittle mothers of brides, and impossible clients, you learn something useful. The calmest person in the room controls the memory of it later. You transferred $11,000 without asking me. I told you I clicked the wrong account. My phone buzzed again. Denise. I didn't answer, but a text preview appeared across the screen. Relax. She just clicked the wrong account. I looked at Camille, then at the message, then back at her. You texted your mother before talking to me. Camille rolled her eyes. Because I knew you'd do this. Do what? This. She gestured at my face. Turn into some cold little banker because one payment moved. One payment. Stop acting like I robbed you. I held her gaze. Then I said very calmly, watch your inbox. She frowned. What? You heard me. I turned and walked out. Behind me, she called my name once, twice, her tone switching from irritated to incredulous. I kept walking. In the car, I did not yell. I did not hit the steering wheel. I did not call her mother and say what I wanted to say. I did what tailors do when a seam bursts under pressure. I assessed damage and secured the fabric before it tore any further. First, I called my accountant and told him to begin reversal procedures on every recoverable dollar. Then I called the bank's business fraud department and reported unauthorized internal transfer from a linked access point. Then I called the credit issuer and removed every authorized user, every saved device, every digital wallet, every recurring charge connected to the joint card. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Mara Feld. She had altered 2 silk blouses at my shop 6 years earlier, became a regular client after I fixed a disastrous tuxedo rental emergency for her brother, and eventually told me, in the dry tone of someone discussing weather, that she specialized in commercial disputes and financial protective actions. When she answered, I said, I need help before my fiancé bankrupts my patients and possibly my business. There was a short silence. Then Mara said, send me everything. I parked outside my shop and spent the next 2 hours forwarding records. Transfer alerts, account screenshots, the photo of the handbag, Denise's text, the authorization path, card statements, access dates. Even the old email, where I had written out, in embarrassingly polite bullet points, exactly which accounts were shared and which were not. At 7:30, Mara called back. Good news, she said. You documented more than most married people in active divorce. I'm not married. Even better, you can still be lucky. What do I do? What are you willing to do? I looked out through the front window of the dark shop. My reflection stared back. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, face emptied out. All of it, I said. Mara did not waste words. Then tonight, you revoke access, reverse what can be reversed, send formal notice that she is not authorized on any business or personal account beyond the joint wedding card, and preserve every communication from this moment forward. Tomorrow morning, I send a letter demanding reimbursement of unrecoverable funds, relinquishment of property purchased with disputed funds, and confirmation that neither she nor her mother will represent any entitlement to your business assets. I closed my eyes for a second. What about the apartment? Whose lease? Mine. Then we prepare occupancy notice. Has she established residence? Partially. Fine. We handle that. You will not threaten. You will not insult. You will not negotiate by phone, unless I tell you to. You will be a statue with receipts. For the first time that day, I almost laughed. A statue with receipts, I repeated. Yes. Can you manage that? Yes. Good. Also, cancel the wedding. The room went very still. I had known that, of course. Somewhere inside me, the knowledge had landed the moment I saw that bag on her arm and heard the laugh. But hearing it said aloud felt like a blade slicing through the final thread. Mara? Yes. There are deposits. There are always deposits. I swallowed. Some of them are non-refundable, cheaper than a marriage like this. I sat down slowly on the edge of the cutting table. Yes, I said, it is. That night, I pulled every dollar back that could be pulled back and shut down all financial access. Every dollar, every card, every login, every convenient little pathway that had let Camille treat my life like an unlocked room. At 10:14 p.m., the reversal confirmations started landing. At 10:52, the joint card was frozen pending fraud review. At 11:08, Denise called me 6 times in a row. At 11:19, Camille began texting. Are you serious right now? My card is declining. You embarrassed me. Call me immediately. This is insane. Then, Mom said you're not answering. Then, Ruben, stop being cruel. Cruel. That word nearly fascinated me. Not dishonest, not mistaken, not shocked, not sorry. Cruel. As if protecting myself from someone else's hand in my pocket were an act of violence. I did not answer. At 11:46, Mara emailed me 2 documents. One was a formal notice to Camille. The other was a draft message I could send in plain language if I wanted a personal paper trail before her legal letter reached inboxes in the morning. I read it twice, made one small edit, added no emotion. Then I sent it. Camille, as of tonight, you no longer have authorization to access, transfer, charge, or otherwise use any funds tied to my personal, business, or reserve accounts. The transfer from my business reserve is disputed and subject to recovery. Do not make additional attempts to access any account, device, or payment method under my name or business. All further communication regarding funds, wedding contracts, residence, or property will go through counsel. I hit send. 1 minute later, she called. I let it ring out. Then Denise called. I let that ring out too. At 12:07 a.m., I went upstairs to my apartment above the shop and looked at the half-packed wedding items still on my dining table. Invitation samples, ribbon swatches, 3 little jars of imported honey Camille had insisted would make classy. Rustic welcome gifts, even though neither of us had ever used the phrase classy. Rustic naturally in our lives. I sat down in the dark and finally let myself feel it. Not the money, the insult. The sheer obscenity of being told with a laugh that $11,000 from the business I built with my own hands was just a mistaken click. The handbag. The mother stepping in like this was all normal. The assumption that I would absorb it because I had always absorbed things, paid quietly, smoothed conflict, kept working. It hit me then that this had never been about one transfer. It was about a test. How much of me could they use before I stopped being useful and started being dangerous? The answer came the next morning. At 8:03 a.m., Camille got 2 emails. One from me, one from my lawyer. And if last night was the tear, that morning was the clean cut. She arrived at the shop at 8:40, before opening, pounding on the locked front door, while I stood inside with a cup of coffee and watched. I did not unlock it. I went to the door, though, because I wanted her to see my face. She was pale, furious, mascara already smudged, as if she had cried hard enough to perform heartbreak, but not hard enough to blur her anger. "You got a lawyer," she shouted through the glass. I opened the door, 1 inch, chain still on. "Yes, you are unbelievable. No, I'm finished. You cannot do this over a misunderstanding. You moved $11,000 without permission. I told you it was the wrong account. And then bought a handbag. That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it." She pressed her palm against the glass. "You are blowing up our whole life." "Our whole life?" I repeated. "Camille, you and your mother tried to normalize theft by calling it a clique." Her face twisted. "Oh my God. Listen to yourself. Theft? From your fiancé?" "Yes." She actually recoiled as if I had slapped her. Then her expression changed again. "Cooler now. Meaner. Fine. Say that in court if you want. Tell everyone how your fiancé needed access because you kept withholding and controlling. See how that sounds." I felt something settle inside me. I had loved this woman. Deeply. Foolishly. And here she was, already reorganizing reality into a weapon. "That's why you got the second email," I said. "What second?" Then I saw it land. She glanced at her phone. Her eyes flicked quickly across the screen. Occupancy notice, property demand. Cease representation of financial authority. Her mouth opened, closed. "You can't remove me from the apartment." "I can. I live there. You have some belongings there. You are not on the lease." She stared at me. "You're doing this because of one mistake. I'm doing this because of all of them." For a second, I thought she might finally say something true. Something raw. Something like, "I panicked," or "I'm sorry," or "I thought I could get away with it, and I didn't think what that meant." But people do not suddenly become honest just because honesty is deserved. Instead, she said, "My mother was right about you." I almost smiled. "That I'm a provider." Her jaw tightened. "No," she said. "That you keep score." I nodded once. "And your mother was right about one thing too." She folded her arms. "What?" I should have been keeping score much sooner. I closed the door. The pounding resumed for another minute, then stopped. Through the window, I watched her stand on the sidewalk, typing furiously into her phone. No doubt, Denise. No doubt reinforcements. They came. Not physically at first. Digitally, Denise emailed me 3 paragraphs about family, forgiveness, stress, bridal nerves, male ego, and the danger of making permanent choices based on temporary emotions. Mara replied on my behalf with 6 crisp sentences and a request that all future communications remain relevant to the disputed funds and property. It was one of the most beautiful things I had ever read. Then Denise called the shop line and left a voicemail. "Ruben, this is getting vindictive. Camille is devastated. She made a simple mistake, and instead of acting like a man who loves her, you're acting like an accountant with abandonment issues." I played that message twice. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. Some people do not see boundaries as boundaries. They see them as insults. That week, I canceled the wedding venue, the caterer, the quartet, the florist, the cake designer Camille had chosen because their sugar flowers are less basic. I lost money, yes, enough to sting. But each cancellation also gave me back a small portion of air. The venue manager, a woman named Pilar, who had the practical gaze of someone who had watched dozens of expensive romances die under uplighting, said quietly, "I'm sorry." "Thank you," I said. "You'll recover." I looked around the vaulted hall we had booked, all stone and candlelight and carefully curated promise. I know, and for the first time, I truly did. Camille came for her things 2 days later under Mara's conditions. Scheduled time, witness present, no private conversation. My assistant Nia stayed in the studio downstairs while Camille and I moved through the apartment like actors forced to share a stage after the play had already failed. She packed shoes, dresses, cosmetics, framed photos. At one point, she held up a sweater I had once mended for her at the elbow. "You fixed this," she said. "Yes." A strange silence followed. I stood by the doorway of the bedroom, arms folded, not blocking her, not helping. "I did love you, she said eventually. There are sentences that arrive too late and too damaged to do any useful work. I believe you, I said. She blinked, maybe surprised I didn't fight the point. Then I added, but not enough to respect me. That landed harder. She set the sweater down and turned to me. Her anger was gone now, not because she had transformed, but because anger had failed. What remained was something thinner. Do you really think I'm some kind of criminal? I took a breath. I think you got very comfortable deciding that whatever belonged to me could become yours if you wanted it badly enough. Her eyes filled. And maybe another version of me, an older one, the one from 6 months earlier, would have crossed the room then, would have softened, would have let tears interrupt pattern recognition. But I had finally learned something too expensive to unlearn. Pain does not erase behavior. I hope you become a better woman than the one standing here, I said. Then I left her to finish packing. The handbag, by the way, was returned. Not gracefully. Mara's letter made it plain that any property purchased with disputed transferred funds was subject to demand and documentation. Camille tried to argue that she had intended to pay it from the joint account eventually, which was both irrelevant and, frankly, hilarious. The boutique accepted the return because the tags were still attached. She had not even gotten the satisfaction of using it. That detail pleased me more than I expected. Word spread, of course. These things always do. Clients are discreet about hems, not lives. I told very few people the full story, but the fragments traveled. Wedding off, financial issue, legal notice, ugly breakup. Reactions sorted themselves into neat categories. Some people were horrified for me. Some were hungry for details. Some, especially older male clients who had built businesses of their own, looked at me with a kind of grave recognition. One of them, Mr. Alvarez, came in for a fitting the week after everything imploded. He was 70, elegant, and had the posture of a man who had never once apologized for taking up space. While I pinned his trouser break, he said, "I heard there was trouble." There was. He looked down at me. "Did you save the business?" "Yes." "Then the rest is heartbreak. Heartbreak heals cleaner than debt." That sentence stayed with me. Heartbreak heals cleaner than debt. He was right. The first month after the breakup felt strange in ways I had not anticipated. I expected grief, and grief came. But so did quiet. Great wide stretches of it. No arguments about whether my reluctance to spend on imported table linens meant I lacked vision. No little emergencies from Denise. No ambient pressure humming through my own apartment like bad wiring. I started staying later in the shop, not to avoid home, but because I enjoyed the work again. I made things. A charcoal peak lapel tuxedo for a widower remarrying at 63. A burgundy velvet dinner jacket for a jazz pianist with impossible shoulders. A wedding gown alteration for a school teacher who cried when she looked in the mirror and said, "I finally feel like myself." That one nearly broke me in the best way. Because that was it, wasn't it? I had not felt like myself for a long time. Somewhere in the choreography of accommodating Camille and Denise, I had become careful in the wrong directions. Not disciplined. Diminished, as though love required me to apologize for structure, caution, or instability. As though being generous meant being porous. It doesn't. Months later, Owen came by the shop with takeout and a bottle of wine and declared that I looked noticeably less haunted. "That obvious?" I asked. "You used to stare at your phone like it owed you bail money." We ate at the work table among pattern books and thread spools. "Did you ever miss her?" he asked. I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said, "but less than I expected." He nodded. "That's usually how you know you missed the dream, not the damage." I lifted my wine glass toward him. "You are annoying. I am invaluable." That winter, I converted the canceled honeymoon suite budget, what little remained after deposits and loss, into something useful. Half went back into the business. New pressing equipment, better lighting in the fitting room, repairs to the upstairs hardwood floors I had been postponing. The other half I took and did something I had not done in years. I left town alone for 4 days. No luxury spectacle, no revenge vacation. Just a quiet coastal inn, a stack of books, long walks, and the peculiar pleasure of ordering dinner without having to negotiate whether the restaurant was special enough for content. On the second night, sitting by a window with rain tapping the glass, I realized I had not checked my banking app obsessively in weeks. That felt like healing. As for Camille, the last thing I heard through indirect channels was that she told people the breakup happened because I was weirdly rigid about money and couldn't handle partnership. Which is fine. People like that need narratives, where accountability is always a personality flaw in someone else. Denise sent one final message. 6 months after the collapse, I hope one day you understand that marriage means sharing. I almost ignored it. Then, after a minute, I replied, with the only sentence worth sending, sharing is agreed. Taking is not. She never wrote again. Sometimes people ask whether I regret how cold I was at the end. The legal notices, the frozen cards, the calm voice, the refusal to fight in circles. No. I regret how long I confused patience with love. I regret every moment I let bad behavior dress itself up as closeness. I regret the version of myself who heard provider and mistook it for respect. But I do not regret the inbox. I do not regret the reversals. I do not regret the lawyer. And I certainly do not regret pulling every dollar back before they could teach themselves that my silence was permission. If there is a moral to any of this, it is not that love makes fools of us. That's too easy. Love can make us hopeful. It can make us brave. It can make us generous in beautiful ways. What ruins us is not love. It is entitlement wearing love's face. These days, when I cut fabric, I still think about trust sometimes. About how invisible the stress can be until the cloth pulls wrong under the hand. About how a bad seam can hold for a while, even look fine from a distance, and still be one sharp movement away from splitting wide open. But I also think about repair. Good tailoring is not only about construction, it is about correction, reinforcement. Knowing where to place strength so the whole garment can carry its shape again. That is what I did with my life. I reinforced what should never have been left exposed. I stopped calling access intimacy. I stopped calling pressure devotion. And I learned that the calmest words I ever spoke, watch your inbox, were not cruel at all. They were the sound of a man finally protecting what he had built.